because without them, it's very difficult for us to put these events on. They're timely, and I don't come cheap, you know. So we have to create some kind of revenue from this. We want to thank Vicente Cedarberg, Ecm Security, U.S. Pavement, and our vendor sponsors, Elevate Northeast, MCA Andrews Company, and also Greenworks Lending. And we should be pretty much close to go. Rocco is on the back side of all of this, and could we advance those? Yeah, could you advance those screens on the PowerPoint, Rocco? Okay, there you go. Did you have something to drink this morning, Rocco? Okay, so we have our upcoming summits for the rest of the 2020. We had to redo a little bit of it because now we're going to webinars instead of the live face-to-face conferences we were doing. These are the rest of our conferences for the rest of the year. If anyone has any wants any information, they can contact me or check out our website. Our next slide is our upcoming, Rocco, there you go. We have diversification in the cannabis industry is on July 8th. And I think, Tito, you're also going to be on that one as well.
Yep, exactly. You doubled my salary for that one.
I know. Now we're going to have to increase our sponsors. And if you have someone else, you might. We only have a couple people in that panel, so if you think of another person that might want to join you, we'd be happy to have them on that panel as well.
Definitely. I'll wrap. Beth and I can figure out some.
Okay, and now I think we can switch over to our panel. Perfect.
All right.
Look at that.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rocco.
And I want to introduce Beth Waterfall, and she's the director at Elevate Northeast. It's all yours, Beth.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks, Rocco. As somebody who's doing some virtual events myself lately, I understand those technical difficulties. So no harm, no foul there. But yeah, thank you, Rick, and thank you to the Journal for having this event today and for inviting me to come along, be the moderator. This is, the first cannabis real estate type of conversation that I've had recently, and I know that the CCC just had a big meeting last week, so there'll be some interesting updates from Commissioner McBride. But just quickly before we get into the panel, just a quick intro for myself. I did it a little bit earlier, but I'm Beth Waterfall. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Elevate Northeast, which is a women-run 501c3 nonprofit organization that does different events and education efforts within the cannabis industry and community outreach efforts just to help normalize, stigmatize, open doors, and create opportunities for people. I also run a marketing agency. That's my vocation before all of this. So I have the privilege of working with some fantastic clients, including Vicente Cedarberg that's on the panel today and one of the sponsors of this event. So today we're going to talk about some updates going on with cannabis. Commissioner Britta McBride is going to start with an update on some stuff that's coming out of the CCC out of last week's meeting. We are also joined by Tito Jackson. He's the CEO of Verdant Medical. It's going to be a dispensary in Boston, and he's also a board member of Elevate Northeast. We also have Valerio Romano. He's an attorney and partner with Vicente Cedarberg out of their Boston office. Vicente Cedarberg is one of the leading cannabis law firms. They've been doing it for 10 years. So Valerio knows some stuff. I mentioned Commissioner McBride with the Cannabis Control Commission, and then also Mitch Susan with Ecm Security. So I suppose we can get started just kind of going around to the panelists if you want to add anything about yourself. So why don't we go right to Tito?
Thank you so much, Beth, and also thank you, Rick. I appreciate being the presence of greatness with all of the folks who are on this panel. My background was first in actually pharmaceutical sales. I worked at Johnson & Johnson and Eli Lilly, and then I moved in to do a healthcare startup. Met a person named Deval Patrick who wanted to be governor, and ended up in his administration. And then for 7 years, I was a Boston city councilor, and proud to have been the first elected official to sign on to the legalization of cannabis. Currently, I run a company called Verdant Medical, which is a vertically integrated medical license. We are seeking to operate in Provincetown, Rowley, Mass, where we'll be doing a grow as well as a retail, as well as in Boston. And for me, this has really been about uplifting people who haven't been able to participate in the cannabis industry on the quote unquote legal side. It's so interesting that we consider this a new industry. I think it has a couple of thousand years on all of us. So I'm really interested in having this conversation with this august body of individuals.
All right, Valerio, want to tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Beth. I appreciate you moderating the event. Thanks to Rick and New England Real Estate Journal. Happy to participate. I started out as an attorney in California. So one way or the other, I've been involved in the cannabis industry for over 20 years. Started out doing criminal defense and helping people not go into custody in the first place by getting them licensed under the big fiction that California used to have. When the Marijuana Policy Project came to Massachusetts to end cannabis prohibition here, they found some of the stakeholders and people involved in the industry, and I was fortunate enough here. And so, you know, I've been involved in the industry one way or the other for over 20 years, worked with, the main thing I do is municipal work with host communities and citing cannabis businesses. Massachusetts is a very progressive state, but it's also an extremely sort of Puritan state. So, you know, working with folks to remove the stigma and allow in their organizations. So, and their municipalities. So thanks a lot for having me, and I'm happy to participate in the panel today.
Well, Commissioner McBride, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started here?
Thank you. Good morning. So I was appointed to the commission in 2017 by Attorney General Healy. Prior to that, I have spent basically the entirety of my career with a couple of minor diversions, doing policy work in government. The longest part of my career was actually spent in the Attorney General's office, where I was chief of the Policy and Government Division and worked on legislation and implementation of laws around prevention of human trafficking, foreclosure prevention, access to veterans benefits, victim compensation, and a host of other issues that were priority issues for that office. I served as deputy counsel to the Massachusetts Senate, and I also served as counsel to the Department of Public Safety. Immediately prior to joining commissioner, being appointed to the commission, I actually ran my own small law office, and I kind of joked that I was enjoying it and actually had clients, and it was kind of incredible. And then the Attorney General asked if I would consider serving in this capacity as the public safety appointee on the commission, which she is statutorily designated to appoint. And there is nothing that is more attractive to, you know, I think attorneys with a little bit of adventure or adventurous spirits than approaching building something from the ground up. And this really was something that was an opportunity to work with some outstanding people and really to address issues that in many ways are, brand new to our state in some form. Some of the issues are not brand new, but a lot of them are issues that we are approaching for the first time. And I was really excited to be able to bring my experience and what I had done in my career to bear in this position. And it's been an overwhelming, really great experience, a ton of learning. But, I'm really proud of the work that we've done as a commission.
Thank you, Commissioner McBride. And then finally, Mitch Susan from Ecm Security. Certainly security is a big part of this conversation. Mitch, anything you want to mention about yourself and ECM?
Good morning, Beth. Thank you very much, and also to Rick. So I retired from law enforcement 7 years ago. I started a private security company, Ecm Security. We provide security for construction sites, warehouses, corporate, private schools. We've done some executive protection for United States personnel that have come down the area that needed protection. And I have a strong connection to the cannabis. I have 2 clients right now. I protect their cultivations and their dispensaries. And I'm also working with several other clients going through the permitting process with the towns, working with them, meeting with the chiefs, the town administrators, owners of the buildings, and just assuring them that, we're going to come in and secure the area, make it nice. And that's what I found an opportunity to do this. And I've been doing this for the last 7 years since I retired.
Thank you, Mitch. Okay, well, let's get right to it. As I mentioned right at the start here, there was a big meeting with the CCC last week. And so we thought that kind of set the stage here, we'd let or ask Commissioner McBride to give us an update on that and pull up some important updates. We won't go too exhaustively into it. You can certainly go to the CCC's website. But Commissioner McBride, why don't you tell us in a nutshell, what do we need to know from last week?
So we are about to embark on our 3rd round of adult use regulatory changes since 2017. And our 2nd round of medical changes. And we have really spent a lot of time honing our regulations and learning from what we've been doing, with regards to implementation, and hearing from individuals who are part of the industry, that service the industry, that are involved in the industry, advocates, about where things need to be better and what needs to be clearer and what should be changed. And so I'm hoping that this is going to be a round of regulations that really is going to be about perfecting to the extent that that's possible to do right now. I mean, this is an evolving industry. It feels like, I've been on this commission for 3 years, and I think that, it feels like I've kind of been doing this for a decade at this point in time. And there's always that joke that in cannabis world, weeks can kind of feel like months, right, in the way that things evolve. So things that are relevant, I think, for this audience, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are many other things that I suspect are going to be on the radar for this round of regulatory changes. But there are things like research facility licenses, which are going to require real estate, right? It's going to require space for many people. So the research facility license is a license that has been in existence since our inception, but largely has been a dormant license. And it is what it sounds like. It's a facility where research would be able to be conducted. So part of what we are going to be spending some time doing, I hope, I proposed a set of regulations that would allow us to move forward with actually licensing facilities and also establish research permits so that we can really get started in Massachusetts and leading the way on developing research that is relevant to the industry here, and that starts to answer a lot of the questions that I think exist around cannabis, and also fits really nicely in with existing industry in the state, right? We're a leader in innovation. So that's one piece of it. Receivership provisions are another piece that we talked about on Friday. And this really has to do with, I mean, again, we're talking about perfecting, right? So it's a means to ensure that operations and any wind down that needs to happen in the case of a bankruptcy or other issues, that we have that in place so that we can do that and facilitate a transition, fairly smoothly. That we can hopefully, in doing this, really promote and try to expedite the implementation of, perhaps more traditional banking products. I think, folks who are familiar with the industry are familiar with the idea that banking is difficult. It's not, easy to come by, right? Because there are federal restrictions. So there aren't a lot of banks that are involved. And I think in Massachusetts at this point in time, we're up to, 3 institutions, and traditional loan products are not available. And while we are trying to move forward and trying to promote ways to invite those institutions to offer loan products and offer more traditional products, there are some things that we need to do on our end to maybe give them a little bit of confidence in doing that. So the receivership provisions are one way of doing that. And then the final piece is buffer zones. So the regulation that's being proposed would take into account impassable barriers, and that hopefully would allow, if that were implemented, I think it would hopefully allow an expansion of the possible locations for marijuana establishments, particularly in areas that are more densely populated. The buffer zone issue has been problematic for applicants and trying to locate locations where they can actually be cited. And the issue there is that the statute, right, that we operate under established a 500-foot buffer zone between marijuana establishments and schools, but it doesn't define how it's measured. And so this would really be tweaking the way that we measure it and hopefully enable an expansion of the properties that would be available. So that's kind of a nutshell of some of the more relevant things that we talked about that might be relevant to the real estate audience. I'm sure there are going to be many other pieces that are going to be coming into play, and that's not at all an exhaustive list of what we're going to be thinking about in the next couple of months and what we're going to be putting out for public comment, but maybe gives you a taste of what we're trying to do and kind of the areas we're working in.
Thank you. And you started to kind of hit on it. I noticed right after somebody had posted in the comments, is this program going to be all about Massachusetts? Yes. However, I'm a big believer in, learning from the processes and absolutely listening in to what's happening in Massachusetts so folks can get involved and be a part of the process in other states. So definitely encourage folks to not be discouraged that we're focusing on Massachusetts here. So thank you for that, Commissioner McBride. So next I want to move along to Val. Commissioner McBride talked about some of the changes that may be coming for people that are looking for a new property. But Val, can you talk to us a little bit about the process for getting a property approval, working with the local municipalities and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. The process for, first isolating a property, this isn't the kind of thing where you can run an MLS listing and think that you have it. What I suggest that my clients do, and, I've done this and certainly looked for properties and met with municipal leaders in well over 100, 150 cities and towns in the 351 that we have in Massachusetts. And so what I suggest people do is take a look at the zoning bylaw to start. There's no silver bullet for zoning in Massachusetts. Like every cannabis business is going to be an industrial manufacturing. It's really over the last couple of years that cities and towns have decided to really thoughtfully zone cannabis, putting the retail use and putting manufacturing in industrial or manufacturing zone. And so take a look at the zoning bylaw, and then I suggest people take actually a map of the municipality and a highlighter and highlight every street where the proposed use will work, and then drive around those streets and look at every single parcel and every single building until they find one that makes sense to them. And then most cities and towns, you can actually go online and pull a property card for that address and find out who the owner is, contact that owner and say, hey, I'm interested in your property for this use. Then when you go to the city and town, you'll have an address. The very first question you're going to get from a planner or a mayor or a town administrator or a police chief or a select person is, where do you want to put this in my town? Typically, they know their towns really well. What address do you want to put this? So even if you're not 100% committed to this address, at least you've contacted the owner, and you can say, I want to put it at, XYZ, depending on the use. And they'll say, okay, that is within our, that's not really where. And so what I like to do is actually we'll have a map printed out of the town, and I'll put it in front of them, and I'll hand them a pen, and I'll be quiet. And I'll say, where would you picture it? And I'll be quiet. I'll let that silence sort of take over. And frequently you'll get that planner to circle a place on the map where they actually find it. And then you can go back and focus on that. But if you come to them without even a property, you seem like a tire kicker. And that's the last thing they want, is people just sort of kicking tires and wasting their time. So now that you have an idea of the address, and also don't be afraid of changing zoning. So I assisted or, changed zoning. I included Harvard Square, Cambridge zoning bylaw or zoning ordinance in there. So don't be afraid of changing zoning. City form of government is easier than town form of government because you can count your votes. But I absolutely suggest that. So after you've properly zoned and you've vetted by the mayor or the planner, then you want to actually go and start thinking about your community outreach meeting, which is a regulatory requirement. And you want to talk to the police chief, talk to fire, talk to the health department, because you need to get a host community agreement in order to move forward. With virtually every single license type, you get a host community agreement. And so that's getting the stakeholders on board. You're not going to get a town administrator to sign a host community agreement without the select people signing off on it. Frequently mayors, because mayors and city councilors sometimes are, at odds with each other. So you want to get the host community agreement, and then you want to do the community outreach meeting. Once you have both of those done, you'll be able to submit your application to the Cannabis Control Commission, and Commissioner McBride and her staff will take a look at it. So those are the fundamental pieces. As far as locking down a property, I wouldn't suggest entering into a lease with really hard money or purchasing the property unless you get it at real fair market value until you have that provisional license from the Cannabis Control Commission. So what we try to get our clients to do is enter into a binding LOI. And your best property is one that has a tenant in it. Maybe there's 6 months left on that tenant's lease, or they're month to month. So the property owner is paying their nets and their mortgage with that money. So you don't have to actually commit to that much. Binding LOI with the property owner, hopefully shorter money, until you can get the nod from the Cannabis Control Commission and provisional licensing. And then you're going to have to go hard money. You're going to do all your permitting, special permit, site plan review, and to be able to finally start construction. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. This is what I've been doing for years in Massachusetts. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about, specifics about this.
Cool. Thank you, Val.
Thanks, Beth, for the question.
Sure. So kind of taking that, I'd like to hear from Tito, our operator on the panel, kind of your experience as an operator with going through the process of finding a location. You have multiple locations and multiple, different types of localities that you've had to deal with. Anything you want to add, Tito, from the operator's perspective as far as securing a property?
And Beth, that you saw the picture earlier that had my hair all black, and it's not anymore. So that speaks to a little bit about choosing properties. I think Valerio did a really good job, and I've worked with VS for the time that I've been in this mix. I guess the couple things I would say is, when you've seen one town or one city, you've seen one town or one city. Do not, and I actually, in particular, as a Boston person, don't think that you're going to go to other cities and towns and people are going to be enamored with you. It is critical that you show the proper level of respect for the people who live there for years, and have their hands really around this. In the city of Boston, there's a whole department here, but typically in cities and towns, the boards are people who do this out of the generosity of their time and out of their hearts. So I would say, one, make sure that you go in and get an understanding. I think what Larry said is critical. I think it's really important that people actually get a feel for the neighborhoods and communities that they're around, right? So there's sometimes, in particular in Boston, where you have situations where we actually have we have 126 schools. And so as Commissioner McBride brought up, you know, we're only 48 square miles. We have 126 district public schools, never mind charter, and never mind parochial schools. So you have to be thoughtful in that regard. One of the things, and I want to accent what Val said, do not sign a lease. Do not sign, we get into a full-fledged lease. You actually typically should be working in LI, which would actually give you an ease of use into that. And so what typically you would do is have some type of hold fee, and this is actually painful, but you typically would have a discounted hold fee that you would allow you to get through the regulatory process prior to actually executing a full lease or purchase and sale. I've seen people, people.
Tito, I think we're having a tough time hearing you a little bit. So,
Okay.
I think I got the gist of what you were saying. But I just wanted to bounce back to Commissioner McBride. One of the things that we talked about was pre-certification process coming online. Is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I'm actually really glad, because as I was listening to what Tito was saying, you know, thinking about, you know, again, you know, we have tried to be nimble with our regulations and be responsive. And so one of the things that we implemented in our last round of regulations, and that I, as one commissioner, I'm hoping that we ultimately will, that we're going to expand it, and that we're going to be thinking more broadly about this, is a pre-certification process, which is right now, it's limited to economic empowerment priority applicants and social equity program participants who are interested in delivery-only licenses and are interested in social consumption establishments. I can talk a little bit more about social consumption. That's a dormant license at this point in time, because there need to be some statutory changes. But the bones of the pre-certification process, which I'm hoping, you know, again, we can expand upon, really tries to get at this issue of holding property, right? And trying to provide access points for applicants who may not necessarily have access to the same types and levels of funding that other applicants do. And so it's to basically try to kind of stagger what is required in the process of applying, and provide a process where the applicants are essentially certified by us as an agency as saying, you know, this is a credible applicant, right? This is an applicant that is getting their ducks in a row. They may not yet have a location, right? They might not yet have a host community agreement in place. They might not have had the community outreach meeting or proof of a bond or escrow, you know, kind of these other elements that are needed for the application process, but they are able to show that they have the, you know, the bare bones of what is going to be needed to be successful in getting through the application process. And the point of that is to enable those applicants to be able to approach a municipality, to be able to approach investors, right? And say, you know, look, we're working our way up to a point where we're going to identify the location. You know, we want to be in this town. We want to be in this city. We want to be in, you know, this neighborhood. And start to work with the municipality without having to have had a heavy investment to that point in time, because we understand that, you know, this is a resource intensive industry, and there's a lot of resources that need to be put in up front. And so trying to stagger that and provide for there to be different points of access makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I would like to see us do more of that.
All right, thank you. Oh, do you want to add something, Tito? Go ahead.
Yeah, so that is amazing because we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally, in hold fees. And it's kind of like having a house that you can kind of drive by and say hi to on the outside, but you can't live in it. And you get to a point where you have so much invested in it that you don't want to pull out. So that position there is one that is for entrepreneurs who, you know, these are essentially startups. And I guess that the one other thing I would say to those folks who are in real estate is that this commercial market has changed. And so you should be looking for cannabis in your commercial spaces. So understand that, you know, Neiman Marcus and a lot of these large stores, all your credited tenants are going out of business. The one thing that we can definitely note, and I think Commissioner McBride said there's like 44 stores, we're a growing industry, and we are the future. And so it is critical that you build relationships with leadership, but also with businesses in the cannabis industry. And one of the things that we do know that has happened over the past couple thousand years is people have consumed cannabis. And so, and that will continue. And there is a great deal of potential upside as these businesses actually grow from one store, and we're able to move up to 3 stores. But then people are also able to grow as well as manufacture. And actually, Commissioner McBride really spoke about where we should be standing as the state of Massachusetts as a world leader in terms of research. And actually bringing this into the medical space where we already have. And so what I would also say to you is you have an opportunity to do cross-pollination with folks who are actually your medical tenants. And so one of the other components that you guys have an opportunity to do is begin to make some of those connections. But because I guarantee you, we are much more the future than we are the past.
If I could just sort of, you know, kind of add on to that too. So during the first year, full calendar year of operations, which was really 2019, $80 million in revenue was generated by adult use operations. That's not tax. That's not, you know, not talking about tax. You're talking about revenue, right? The estimate for this fiscal year was between $93 and $172 million. Now, that's not taking into account the COVID issue and the fact that a lot of these operators were, you know, shut down for a couple of months. But it does, I think, give you a sense of the scale of the industry. And this is with, you know, still a limited number, you know, growing number, but a limited number of retailers operating. I mean, as that grows, as we have, you know, more cultivation, as we have more product manufacturers, micro business, I mean, you know, as it's sort of growing, the potential for this, I mean, it is a growing industry. You know, other places where industries are shrinking, this is not that. And so for folks who are on, you know, this webinar and are thinking about the potential, there's a huge amount of potential with this industry for sure.
Yeah. And no one leads in your space. There's not. We don't have a go-to, and maybe Valerio has some folks, but there hasn't been like folks who are like the go-to folks in that space. So there's an opportunity to step forward and be bold with leadership.
Let me just add one more little bit. I know we got a lot of questions for Mitch as well, but you know, the commission talked about pre-certification, something that's happening at the local level as well with the host community agreement. Is getting sort of a bifurcated host community agreement. Now, the first half isn't sufficient to submit to the commission, but it does help you go to property owners. What you do is you go to the board of selectmen or select people or the city council or the mayor, and you show your bona fides of your company, right? we're capitalized enough to get this done. We've got, you know, a good group of people that you can be proud of that will do this and will operate well in your city or town. And they'll give you sort of, you know, a sign off, say, okay, we like you guys. If you come back to us with a property, you'll get a full host community agreement that we can take to the Cannabis Control Commission. And this is something that I think more and more people should try to do, so that landlords don't think that you're just tire kicking when you go approach them. And so you get this sort of bifurcated host community agreement, get the first half. So similar to the commission doing this sort of pre-certification, you can do it at the local level also, so that you have you know, more juice when you go and talk to landlords as well. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Val. And that's a good segue, because I want to talk about what, I mean, having that is a great idea for going to the towns and the landlords. But I wanted to go to Mitch and talk a little bit about security. Certainly there are requirements in our regulations that cannabis licensees need to follow, but a strong security plan can also make the sell easier. So Mitch, do you want to talk a little bit about security and how that can help make a property more, and a licensee in general, more attractive?
Sure, Beth. So CCC has set the bar very high for the level of security required, you know, with recording, alarm systems, you know, security on site, 24/7, 90-day backup of videos. So I've worked with Valerio in the past, and it does take a lot of time to find the right location. But once you do, I would come in with him. He would introduce me to the landlord. We would talk about security, what would happen to the building if it's a cultivation site or retail site. You know, if it's a retail site, we're going to beautify the area, make the inside secure, cameras, lighting. Same with cultivation. We come in, you know, and same thing. I've had a couple of both my cultivation sites we have are in the industrial area, dead end. And there was suspicious activity, criminal activity going on prior to us getting there. Now that we're there, there's lighting, there's security. It's moved on. So we've made the area safer. A lot of time, most of the time, every time I go in, I have a good relationship with the police department, the selectmen, everyone. I go to all the meetings, talk with them, make sure security is going to be at the level required by the CCC. And that's huge. That helps out a lot of people. That makes them feel safe. It makes the landlord feel safe that, you know, we're coming in, we're going to make the area nicer. We're going to, you know, have security. And, you know, sometimes the landlords can be, as Valerio will attest, that landlords can be a little leery at first. And then once you talk to them and show them what you're going to do, they come around. And, you know, I'm working with two groups right now, power strip malls, I should say strip malls. 2 anchor stores are gone, Kmart and a Shaw's. So you have small stores in there now, pizza place, a salon, a pet place, and there's no traffic. I met with all those owners of the business. They're excited. You know, the pizza guy's excited. You know, people are going to come in, buy the marijuana, and he's excited. But there's going to be more traffic. Security will be there. There'll be cameras. And they're happy that we're coming into it. So, and I met with the owner of the property, and he's very excited. So it's a plus for landlords to have us come in.
And Mitch is awesome, by the way. So that's someone you guys should definitely. And you know, well, nobody told me I'll be hanging out with the police when I started hanging out with Mitch. It's okay, but but I think one of the things that people should also note, nationally, there's a 10% decrease in crime around areas that there are dispensaries. Mitch is a nice guy, but he's former law enforcement. And so those people who are doing stuff that isn't on the up and up, they don't tend to like to hang out with Mitch and his crew. So that's one of the things that you should also be thinking of. You know, in Boston, I actually voted for or supported the first medical dispensary that was in Boston. Until very, very recently, there had been no calls to the police department on Milk Street. And in fact, most people did not know that it was actually there, right? So I think that's the other component. getting through the quote unquote reefer madness mentality. These are professionally run organizations. I don't know, what the actual average sale right now is, but I would assume it's much closer than to a Hermes tie in terms of the actual general transaction. So you're not talking about stuff that is cheap, and so that's one of the things that you should also be thinking of. And that one other thing you should think of is that there are, and my organization is participating in this, loyalty programs that can actually help the other businesses around you, which we seek to cross promote. Commissioner on Up and Up legally, I just want to make sure that, but cross promote and make sure that we are, yes, a destination, but people also go look at the bookstore or the restaurant and the other places that are in those areas. And I would submit to you also that the commission, as well as the town, it would look favorably on you wanting to kind of help those other businesses in that space. So that's the one other component. We definitely know that people will be coming there, and we want to make sure that everyone in the area gets the love, not only our cannabis shops.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Tito said, I mean, on the Linway, for instance, they're directly thinking of us as an anchor tenant, the one that we're opening there, to help the businesses around. It was said openly at city council meetings when we were getting our host community agreement and then our local permitting. So that they want to revitalize that area, and they see, lots of people coming in with discretionary cash in their pocket to spend at other businesses in the area. So they're looking at us like that. And I've been asked by other cities and towns directly, what is the other financial benefit? How much do people spend at, buying sandwiches and t-shirts and jewelry and whatever else? They've asked me that question directly. So people cities and towns are absolutely thinking about this business in that way.
Thanks, Val. Certainly the times, they are changing, and I just want to do one last kind of our pre-planned questions before we look at some of these questions that are coming in the chat. I mean, we're talking about, Tito mentioned that big stores are closing and we have these anchor tenant opportunities. Do you think that's just part of people becoming more comfortable with cannabis as they're becoming more informed about it and seeing businesses just being normal and not having these horrible crimes and the reefer madness kind of fears that people had? Do you think that's just a natural progression with cannabis, or can we point that more to COVID-19, where over the past few months, particularly back in March and April, we were seeing outside of Massachusetts that cannabis was deemed an essential industry. So jobs were kept and businesses were kept alive. So how would you attribute these shifts in businesses, or excuse me, in towns being more receptive to cannabis? And that's for everybody.
Okay.
Look, I think it was, our former attorney general, when cannabis first started in Massachusetts, there was this big fear of the unknown, as if it's not ubiquitous and cannabis is everywhere anyway. But, there was this big fear of the unknown, and the cities and towns were told, you better hurry up and zone this, or else it's going to go right across the street from your high school, and all your kids are going to be outside smoking pot all day, right? So that's basically what the former attorney general told the cities and towns. So they zoned it in the back of industrial parks. And this was when it was back just medical, and basically marginalized medical patients. And they're still doing their cannabis drug deals in the back of unlit industrial parks like they've been doing all along, right? And so more recently, and a lot of it has to do with Kaplan and Page, who represent a lot of the cities and towns in the Commonwealth, but other advice from council, it's become clear, well, cannabis, retail particularly, is a commercial use. So where's your commercial district? And let's start putting it there, right? And so a much more thoughtful approach has come to cannabis in Massachusetts because the sky hasn't fallen, right? Actually crime has been solved across the street, like in Netta and Brookline, unrelated to the dispensary, based on the fact that you had a cannabis business there with all this security. And so given the fact that the sky hasn't fallen, the cities and towns are like, well, I want my 3 or 6%, of revenue. I want to have local control over cannabis coming into my city or town. So what am I going to do? I'm going to zone it in my commercial district for the retail use. I'm going to zone, manufacturing and cultivation in my manufacturing district, and be much more thoughtful approach to zoning so that it makes sense. Revitalizing old mill space that has, all this vacant vacancies, and bringing these anchor tenants to your commercial district. So that's a lot of what's happened to make it so that cities and towns are more receptive. The sky hasn't fallen with the responsible operators that we have, thanks in part to the regulators saying you better be responsible or else we're not going to let you have a license, and we're going to watch that. So that's a lot of the reason why it seems to be working and the zoning is opening up.
Go ahead, Tito.
No, I think people just need to be very clear. This is a professional operation. And by the way, as the entrepreneur, we have just as much to lose as you do. I do not want a call from Commissioner McBride. That's the last thing other than to say, happy holidays to me. So when it comes to the actual, and you have folks like Mitch, we have the most security that we're required to have panic buttons, cameras that, that can see I need a haircut and my eye color and all of that stuff. So when it comes down to what we're doing, this is of the highest level of professionalism, or else they don't let us open. And if we fall below that, the commission has no problem letting you know and actually potentially even closing your doors if you don't stand up. But I think to answer your question, Beth, I think it is to me the perfect storm. Many of the restaurants are not going to open back, right? I've talked to a lot of folks in Boston with limited capacity. There's no way, because they have those fixed costs around your kitchen, and so you're not actually going to be able to open back, and you're going to see tons of retail spaces that are actually going to be open. And I think lastly, on what Valerio was saying, you want to begin to look at these Main Street locations, because we definitely will be a draw and an opportunity to cross-pollinate with other businesses. And this is not seedy. I just want to be very, very, very clear. If people are part of the illicit marketplace, they're not coming to us. I'll be very clear, we cost too much, right? So that is actually not the group of individuals that you're going to be getting in our marketplace. Folks are going to come spend $100, $125 per transaction, and that's the type of clientele that you'll have.
Thanks, Tito. Mitch, you want to add anything there?
I'm good. It is well, I'm not good, but it's come a long way in the last 7 years. We're seeing people start to open up more and be more receptive to having a dispensary, a retail place come into their location. There was one town where we were in the same area as the adult live dancing area. Now we're in the industrial park and moving into the commercial areas. So it's good. And the strip malls. So that's good. And we come in and the locations we have, we're very professional. Not all of my security officers are police officers, former police officers, equal opportunity employers. And you know what? We set a good example dealing with the public. And like Tito said, we're not having the black market cannabis come into the area. They're still going to their dealers. We're having high-end people come in, and it's good. It's good for everyone. It's good for the pizza restaurant next door.
Thank you, Mitch. And Commissioner McBride, certainly a big change was curbside delivery, and that came as a result of COVID-19 and the limitations. But anything else you want to add, whether it's delivery or just kind of how things are changing and how you attribute it?
You kind of froze up for like 1 second there, but I think it's sort of it's piggybacking on the conversation about curbside delivery and sort of how things are evolving, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to piggyback on all of the comments that have already been made about how this is growing and how it's expanding. And I mean, there's no magic here, right? Town administrators, city administrators, right? City officials generally, I mean, you're going to have a subset, but I think by and large, administrators of municipalities take a fairly conservative approach, right? Because they're on the hook for things and they don't want to hear it from constituents. And so I think in a lot of ways, there was sort of a, I'm not going first, right? Like it was, not me. You go first and let's see how this plays out. And then, you know, as Valerio and as Cheeto have said, right, like the sky didn't fall. And so you have more communities now that are more looking at this in a more progressive way, and are, you know, figuring out ways, how can we incorporate this into the fabric of our community? And I know that, you know, there's been a lot of criticism about some elements of local control. We can certainly talk about that. But I do think that there is something that's really important that is embedded in that notion of municipal and local control. And it is very much about the fabric. You know, how do you fit this into the fabric of your community? And what does it look like, as Cheeto said, you know, out of the gates, right? If you've seen one city or one town in Massachusetts, you've seen one city or one town in Massachusetts. And I think that, you know, providing their options, right? Providing the options and allowing for municipalities to figure out what is this going to look like and sort of growing into that is the way that this is going to evolve to be a, you know, durable, sustainable industry here in the state. And I think that that's the direction that we have been marching towards. And, you know, I think that that's a positive. The work that Mitch does and the work that, you know, security contractors do is extraordinarily important because it highlights for municipalities that if you've thought about the concern, we've thought about how to mitigate that concern. And that it's not just in the security arena, right? There are other pockets, right, in our regulations where we've tried to take an approach of what is the concern here? Okay, let's figure out a way to mitigate that concern and answer the question that gets raised. How do we do this responsibly and how do we do it well? And then the final point that I'll make is that Massachusetts is in a really unique position. We are on the East Coast, right? We're the first jurisdiction to have adult use. And, you know, and we are a small state and we're surrounded by states that you can get over the border into, you know, other states in a matter of minutes, in some cases, not, you know, not hours. And so trying to weigh, you know, how do we do this and approach it in a way that makes it so that we can evolve as things start to change in other states. We can evolve as things start to change maybe at the federal level. And again, I go back to just, you know, are we creating a durable, sustainable industry in Massachusetts? And I think so much of what we do at the commission level, you know, drives towards that. And it certainly is something that when I think about our regulations, that's always top of mind to me.
Great, thank you.
What are our operators going to do, you know, when the federal switch gets flipped, if that happens?
Yeah. Beth, I just want to, I would be remiss if I didn't say it is critical, in particular with our brothers and sisters in the real estate industry, that you also note that you should be helping people of color get into this industry. I know a lot of them may not have the connectivity in the commercial marketplace, and it's a total different marketplace. But what I would say to you is that one, from the commission side, and I know Commissioner McBride has done work in this space, but also on the municipality side in Boston, there is you know, a move to make sure that people who've been locked out of these industries have an opportunity to get actually locked up, don't get locked out of these industries. So what I would say to you is even if individuals don't necessarily come to you with all of the things that you're kind of used to with the suits and the like, have those conversations, build those relationships, and help those individuals get into the space. It's the right thing to do, but it's also from the state level as well as municipal level, the push that we all are really trying to ensure that we build wealth across the board and not only in the same pockets.
Definitely. Cannabis is unique for so many different reasons, but one of them is what I believe very strongly is really all participants' responsibility to recognize the history of the war on drugs and the disproportionate enforcement of marijuana laws on Black and brown people, and doing what we can to create space for them, while we're profiting in our businesses as well. So thank you for that.
And we will be talking more on that on July 8th.
I was just going to say that. So July 8th is the next panel. And I'm sure we're going to be touching on that. Tito will be on that. But before we break, we did have a couple questions coming through the chat. So if anybody
Actually, I think Valerio.
Yeah, just real quick, just hire people and put them on your boards. It's not that complicated, right? Just give them jobs, and then they'll get the experience. And if they want to leave and go start their own business, then they can do that. But it's not like it's some big mystery. Hire people and put them on the boards. It doesn't really take that much analysis.
Amen.
Well, it's equality, not entitlement. Treat everyone the same, and we can go forward.
Sorry for interrupting, Beth.
No worries. All right. So are we confident that I saw something about probably for Commissioner McBride about are there any towns where pre-certification is already available?
So pre-certification is at the state level, it's at the commission level. I think that what Valeria was talking about was towns are starting to maybe think about doing something similar. I know that I know of one community, Maynard, where there was an agreement that was reached that was, it provided for the negotiation of a host community agreement without there being an explicit location yet. And it sort of gave the applicant the ability to identify the location and come back, right? And ask if that was going to be a permissible place to locate. And that's a really progressive way of communities approaching that. So I think that, that's one example that other communities might benefit from looking at.
And there's nothing in the regulations that say that the communities can't do that. But I think we're going to see more instances of that as people are getting more used to it and different scenarios come about. So that's definitely an area I'm excited to see. Just looking at the questions here. Rick, was there anything that you saw that you want the panel to look at or talk about?
Well, there were a few questions that were presented. I'm not sure if we want to respond to them after, or if you want to present them now.
Yeah, there's one, this might be something for a more in-depth conversation, but pardon me, I'm reading. Can anyone help summarize the upcoming changes which may affect cannabis eligible properties, such as the remeasuring of the 500-foot buffer, which Commissioner McBride spoke to? I came in late right at the end of that segment. Thanks, everyone. Anything to add there?
Well, so we talked about the buffer zone, that potentially, being something that's going to be talked about in the next round of regulations, which we're just starting right now, and we'll be going out for public comment. I expect sometime probably mid-July. We also are kickstarting our research facility licensing process, which there's a lot of potential opportunity there for commercial real estate. There need to be locations that are identified, and so that's something to think about also. And then receivership provisions, which is really intended to secure, provide some additional security, not physical security, but some additional security with regard to if there are issues that arise, like bankruptcy proceedings, like businesses that are not able to be sustained any longer, that we can put into place a process that will hopefully promote things like traditional loan products and the like being offered to the industry. But that also should provide, a level of comfort to landlords as well, that, all of these things are being buttoned up. And, it all kind of falls into the same bucket of doing this in a way that is responsible and sort of forward thinking.
Maybe I could add just one quick thing too. So the buffer zone that's described in the state regulations is, and Commissioner McBride, please, sort of correct me or if there's something to add. It doesn't necessarily usurp municipalities' authority in deciding where they want it to go. So a municipality typically has the ability to reduce or enlarge that buffer zone. Now, I know that there's some discussion, particularly legal discussion, as to whether expanding it, making it at 1,500 feet or whatever, is permissible or not. But right now, in my experience, the commission, and I don't think any courts necessarily have done this either, have said that a municipality is unable to say, well, actually, we like it. We like 300 feet. Or we like 1,000 feet. And so you can go to your municipality and work with the, on amending zoning so that you can put it kind of where you want, and as long as you don't run afoul of spot zoning. And that won't necessarily offend the regulations at the state level. Is my understanding correct?
So municipalities, it's explicit in the statute, right? The municipalities can reduce that buffer zone if they choose to do that. I think the expansion of it is a different legal question and is something that has not been decided. And so I think that there is, there are still some things that are at play there. But, municipalities clearly, have to give some thought to how they're going to approach this. And I think that, we will end up seeing, Valerio can speak to this, perhaps better than anybody, right? That we're going to end up seeing probably over the course of the next several years, different forms of litigation on, many of these topics that are going to start to kind of nail down, this is your authority to do the following, or, you're limited in this way. So yeah, that's my understanding of it.
Okay, well, I think we are almost out of time. This was a fantastic conversation. Everyone had such great information. I'm so pleased that we put this panel together. I want to thank Beth. She did a great job moderating. I want to thank the rest of the panel. That's all right. You can applaud.
Okay. Yeah, Beth had a tough group to moderate, so
Please.
Oh, I don't think so. I think everyone did fantastic. It was
Y'all are great.
very informative.
Thank you all.
I know that Valerio has some question that he's going to respond later to some of these people that have asked, which is fine. And I'm sure if anyone has any other questions that they want to submit, we'll make sure that the panelists do have them and they can respond to them after this. I want to thank our sponsors again, Vicente Cedarburg, Ecm Security, Greenworks Lending, MCA Andrews, U.S. Pavement, and Elevate Northeast. I also want to remind everyone that July 8th, we'll have another panel discussion on diversification in the cannabis industry. And we're also going to have a spotlight on the cannabis and the commercial real estate that will be coming out at the end of July. There'll be a couple of some articles and some advertisements and stories in there. So everyone will be able to watch that in our digital edition, as well as we'll have some, this panel discussion will be on our website on Friday, and people can watch it again. All the panelists, if you didn't get to see yourselves, you'll be able to see it again. And that is going to be Friday on nerej.com/videos. And we hope everyone that missed it today can go back and view it, as well as you can probably find Valerio's interview on there too. His one-on-one interview is on that page as well. So I appreciate everyone for watching today, and I hope to see everyone on July 8th. Thank you all. Have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.